How's everyone? Good? You guys ready? Well, it's been a really tense night overnight for many people in the state's north, but they are waking up with a sense of relief. Yesterday we said we were preparing for the worst but hoping for the best, and largely that seems to be what has happened. The warnings and advice was heeded. People did what we asked of them, and I would like to thank them for that. It's incredibly important, and as a result of their efforts, despite that tense night, no lives were lost. There has been minimal property damage. The biggest impact at this stage is on the energy network. 64,000 households are without power right now. The threat is not over though. The Bureau is still advising that there is a lot of rain still to come and that the risk of flooding remains high. So we are not out of the woods, but we will continue to work to be prepared to support Queensland communities. Our energy workers are out there on the ground right now working to reconnect power. I'll ask Matthew Calliope from the Bureau to provide a weather update.
Thanks, Premier. Tropical Cyclone Kirrily made landfall around 10 p.m. last night near Townsville. The system has continued to move west and drop below tropical cyclone strength. The remnants of that cyclone will continue to move west over the coming days through into central and western parts of Queensland. Now, as that system continues to move, it has an extreme amount of moisture through the atmosphere with it and will produce heavy to intense rainfall and could lead to life-threatening flash flooding and damaging winds as the system continues to move west. The areas through the northern and central interior of Queensland are now under that severe weather warning, and that system will continue to move west towards the border over the weekend and into Monday. The flood watches continue for coastal and adjacent inland catchments between Tully and Airlie Beach and parts of the central west and Gulf catchments. Minor to major riverine flooding will be possible across those areas as the system moves west over the coming days. With the amount of moisture associated with the ex-tropical cyclone, that moisture will extend across Queensland, including over southeast Queensland over the coming days. We do see the potential for severe thunderstorms and intense rainfall with those storms as they form over the weekend. There is also continued monsoon through the latter part of next week, so we will be watching that extremely closely. We did see rainfall amounts through the Townsville area of 100 to 150 millimetres, and we are continuing to monitor that rainfall as it moves further west. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. As the Premier's indicated, I'm really pleased to stand here today and say that we had no loss of life last evening. We've had no reported missing persons or serious injuries as a result of the crossing of the cyclone last night. Can I also acknowledge the support that the community gave to emergency services workers? The preparation for this event has been outstanding. We issued 6 emergency alerts last night asking the community to take shelter and stay off our roadways, and the community definitely did that, which has resulted in that great outcome. This morning, the disaster management system has been in contact with our local and district disaster management units, and I can say what we're primarily seeing is some significant vegetation damage in the area, which is also impacting our energy network. We have seen some minor to moderate damage to infrastructure and to residents, but can I say this is not widespread. We have not seen any widespread flooding. Obviously there was heavy rainfall last night and we saw some of those small creeks and catchments respond to that. The focus now shifts to where the rain is moving. We are now, as we speak now, doing door knocks in Georgetown on the Etheridge River to around about 15 residents there due to the rises we're seeing in those river systems there. Over the next few days we will have isolated communities, but I have been advised through our disaster management network that they are fully prepared. Resupply has taken place. We have sufficient aviation fuel food, water for those communities to sustain those communities, and we also have appropriate plans in place to continue that resupply over the next coming weeks. As we've heard from the Bureau, we are expecting the water to move inland and may impact both the Gulf and Channel Country area of inland Queensland. So that's where our focus will be over the next few days, and we ask that the Queensland community in those areas please stay in contact with our messaging, particularly the messaging from the Bureau around flood impact areas. Thank you.
Good morning, thank you. Very pleasingly today to report that there was no swiftwater rescues required overnight, and call numbers for the State Emergency Services have been quite low, so 215 have been received in the last 24 hours to 8 a.m. We do expect that to increase, but full credit to the communities through those impacted areas and their planning and preparation and heeding the advice of authorities. It's been remarkable, and it's gratefully accepted by the emergency services. As you've heard from the Bureau of Meteorology, this event's not over. Still significant rain dropping as it moves through the remainder of the state. So we still encourage all the community to stay informed and respond to those messages as they come out. But importantly, as we move through, we don't want to have events caused through, as people move about, live power lines, hazards from floodwater. Stay informed and we'll hopefully pass through this next period of time with a very safe outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Premier. Can I join with the Premier and all the other speakers in really congratulating North Queenslanders, local governments and emergency services personnel for the excellent work that's been done to prepare for this event, and that is reflected in the sort of figures that we've heard and the relatively small damage that we seem to have experienced in North Queensland so far. So well done to North Queensland. From a federal perspective, we've made a number of different resources of the Australian Defence Force available to Queensland at the Queensland Government's request. For several days now, we've had a number of ADF planners and National Emergency Management Agency staff embedded with the Queensland team here at headquarters. We've also put ADF personnel and helicopters that are based in Townsville on standby. As yet, they have not been required to assist, but they remain available to Queensland should they be required. The early indications seem to be that this event is going to be able to manage within the capacity of the state government, but as I say, those ADF resources are on standby and are available should they be required. So again, congratulations so far to everyone. We're not out of the woods yet with this possible flooding that may still occur. And again, I think that this is an excellent demonstration of how we can protect Queenslanders when we see all levels of government working cooperatively together. The Albanese and Miles governments are standing shoulder to shoulder with North Queensland, and that has meant that we seem to have been able to work together in a way that is protecting our friends up north. So stay safe up north. There's still a bit more rain to come, but so far so good. Thank you.
Each disaster is different, and we've certainly seen that overnight. We asked North Queensland to prepare for the worst, and they did. Can I also convey my thanks to the people of North Queensland for the spectacular job that they have been doing in preparing for Tropical Cyclone Kirrily. What we saw overnight, of course, was a cyclone that crossed the coast in one of the larger population bases that we have seen in recent histories for cyclones, and it is remarkable that the damage that we have seen has resulted in no loss of life and minimal damage across the region. It's a testament to the work that we do in preparing for these cyclones, and I know that Queenslanders will of course continue to prepare for cyclones and be able to respond to anything that comes our way. We're not out of the woods yet. We've still got the flooding that we're asking people to pay special attention to for the warnings. In terms of the Reconstruction Authority, we've got counter-disaster operations that I'll be seeking funding application for today for the local government areas of Hinchinbrook, Palm Island, Townsville and Burdekin. Those are funds that can assist the local governments in those areas with their disaster preparedness, as well as any costs that they incur in the cleanup from this event and making safe after the event. This has been a wonderful response from our emergency services personnel. Not only have we had our local personnel on the ground, but we got deployments from interstate as well. We are, of course, keeping those in place to be able to respond to any SES calls that we receive today, and also reassess the weather as it moves further out to the Gulf and the Channel country to make sure that we have crews like Swiftwater Rescue able to deploy if and when necessary.
Any questions?
The damage to the power network up there, how significant is that? Is it going to be a long-term fix to try and get power back to some of those homes?
So our work is assessing that right now. It does appear that most of the damage is to the power lines that run from the street into individual homes. That means that each fault only affects one household, but there are many of them that need to be addressed. And so we'll complete those assessments and have a reconnection plan available within the next few days. Might ask the Energy Minister if he's got anything to add.
So the Premier is spot on with that advice. We have seen a lot of damage out there on the local distribution network, but the good news is that the transmission network is intact. So crews are out on the ground this morning and more help is on the way. Those crews that we pre-deployed into places like Rockhampton are on the road right now. So we have more help on the way to Townsville and North Queensland to try and reconnect as quickly as possible. The latest figures indicate that there are around 64,000 homes and businesses without connection. That number is likely to increase, and the reason that's going to go up before it comes down is that those crews are out assessing the damage and they're finding vegetation, trees onto power lines and power poles, and to make those power lines safe, the first thing that they need to do is de-energise them so that we avoid the risk to households, to businesses, to other emergency services crews moving around. They'll then start work on reconnection, but as the Premier has said, for the reconnection of power to those homes and businesses, this will be a bit of a marathon, not so much a sprint. They'll be working hard around the clock as they have done in previous events. Just to put it into context, following the Christmas Day storms, it took about 2 days for us to assess the damage enough to be able to release that restoration plan, and so we're hoping to do that maybe later in the weekend or early next week. Finally, just to add that our top priorities this morning are working with water authorities and the telecommunications companies. We know how important it is that you can access information, and so getting back access to mobile phone towers, etc., is something that we'll support those businesses with, and making sure that critical infrastructure, including water, is able to continue to operate. Thank you.
Townsville City Council has asked residents to conserve water because of the energy impacts on their water supply, and so we just asked that if media could assist with getting that message out. Other questions?
With Jasper, we know that the flooding kind of came later. Do we have like the extra crews on hand in case it does?
We are well prepared for that, but you're right. The advice was always that there would be significant rainfall associated with this cyclone, and so that's what we've been preparing for. Of course, initial predictions suggested it might track down the coast, and the fact that it's heading west into less populated areas means the impact in terms of scale is likely to be less, but that doesn't make it any less important that we're prepared for those smaller communities, and that's what our teams have been working to do.
Minister Wells said the early indications is that it'll fall within state government capacities. Yesterday he preemptively called it a disaster. Will that be the standard moving forward, just to have a wee basis kind of?
Look, every disaster is different, and the way we prepare for it is based on the advice that we're provided by the Bureau. We'll continue, though, to be as prepared as we possibly can be, and that's what you've seen work in this instance.
With vegetation and trees down, is there any major roads that are blocked or anything around?
It does appear that the damage to the road network is really vegetation and debris over the road, and that's kind of the easiest thing to fix. So there'll be crews out there now, and if roads are closed, they should be open pretty quickly.
Some of the modelling's apparently suggesting that there's a possibility have another cyclone next week. Can you sort of speak on that a little?
I'll ask the Bureau to speak of that, but I don't know what's going to happen next week, and I also don't have the lotto numbers. So.
Thanks. As I mentioned, we're monitoring the long-range forecast really closely. It does appear that through the latter part of next week there is some potential to see some more heavy rainfall, but that's normal for this time of year. So as I mentioned, we'll monitor the range of different guidance we look at and continue to update the community on how we see any potential for heavy rainfall or systems developing over the coming week. For far north Queensland is the main area. The monsoon does remain over the Cape communities, and so we'll really be focusing in on that area over the coming week.
Thanks, everyone.
Sorry. Well, from you know how you were talking about the moisture in the southeast. Could you elaborate on what that could mean for us here?
It generally means that we will see shower and storm activity return to the southeast parts of Queensland, and there is elevated levels of moisture. So the potential for us to need to issue warnings for, say, showers and storms is there over the coming days, particularly through Sunday and Monday for southeast Queensland.
Earlier in the week, the Bureau had said that it could be worse than usual. What are we thinking now?
Well, as the Premier mentioned, the latest advice, and certainly over the past couple of days, is the system will continue to track west, and that's why we're monitoring those communities through the interior and western parts of Queensland. That does lessen the risk of southeast Queensland, because the guidance did it sort of 4 or 5 days ago indicate the potential for the system to drift southeast and then affect this parts of the world around Brisbane and the southeast of Queensland.
Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. Have a good day.